how do founders then build some of those systems in place? And I have maybe I'll use a personal example, sort of two actually, for me. So I think I'm decent at building process. Like that's a core thesis of what we are as a company at Shore. And yet my process broke down two ways in the past 24 hours. It really frustrated me and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And I said, I think I'm better than many. One example was our whole thesis when we have a whole process for sending out a script of what we want to talk about to our podcast guests. So you're a good example of this. Yesterday afternoon, I was looking for the script. What's the deal? I assumed it had been already sent out to you. It hadn't been sent at all. And I was pretty frustrated. I was like, hey team, like we have a whole process. Why am this only coming up when I finally come up for air yesterday afternoon? Those in something broke down in the process. And then same thing, we actually had a customer this morning who we have a whole process for. I was just checking in with him. And he said, oh my God, there's all these issues we're having right now, which is something that scares me. And I'm like, why is it taking me as a CEO to reach out at that point to find out that there's an issue when like the team who's working with that client should really be doing that? Once again, we have a process for this. So something broke and I'm frustrated at my team, but I'm more frustrated that our process somehow broke down. And where did we go wrong, or where did I go wrong?
How are the processes stored? Are you using a tool that stores your process?
Yeah. We write everything. We have a single tool for essentially all of our stuff. We use ClickUp for everything. All of our processes are in ClickUp. The tracking of all the work is in ClickUp. The time tracking, when things are done, the checklist, everything's in ClickUp, including communication, except with clients, which is either in Slack or email.
And were you able to go back and look at where the process broke down in there?
No, so I've asked them to give me an update on what the process is and review it with them.
The thing is ultimately really want to create a culture around that where people are always looking at how we can improve those things. Things are going to break. Like that's going to happen. We know that's going to happen. And I would say like for super critical processes, we need to have ideally automations in place that will catch things when they don't happen. So it is frustrating, but to me, it's sort of like an interesting opportunity for you as the founder, right? To be like, not only why did this process break, but why do our processes break in general? Because I'm almost would guarantee that it's not something that's only in this process. And I would also probably guess that it is a human element that got messed up. Right. So one of the things that I always find about with automation is great because it's cheap. Usually it's cheaper. It, never gets sick, 24/7, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately for me, the benefit of automation is the removal of errors. That's how I like to think about automation, right? Because it's something that we don't have to have a human be involved in. And even if the automation screws up, usually most systems like Zapier and stuff allow us to have another system in place that lets you know that something didn't work or didn't complete. That's why the optimized automate outsource framework is what it is, right? So we optimize first, we look at what we have and we optimize, remove any unnecessaries, remove duplicates, whatever it is there. Then we look at the automations. And then if there's anything left over at that point, that's when we look at people. We really want to use people as a last resort, not only because people are fallible, but also because if you give automatable work to a human, you are in essence dehumanizing them, right? So they won't engage with that work. It won't be that. So on the face of it, this is a great opportunity to look at why the process didn't work.
So I like to think of the idea of like, I don't automate until I have a good idea of how to build the process itself. So like when, you first have to understand it before you can automate it. So when you put that in place, how much work did you manually first before you try to automate something?
A lot, usually, honestly, because otherwise all we're doing, we may very well be automating like, the bomb going faster into the ground basically, right? Technology, I love technology, but technology amplifies habits, right? It's going to make good habits better and bad habits worse, faster. That's all it's going to do. A lot of times also we try to automate something that if we had optimized first, we'd find out that we didn't even need that to process at all to begin with. This is how I teach people to build processes, and this would help in this situation that you're describing. The way that most people build processes, and I don't know if this is how you did it, doesn't matter. Most people will show someone how to do something and then they'll write it down, which is really actually not very good because we have heuristics and shortcuts in our brain that we don't know are there and then we don't convey those. So you show somebody the process, you say, all right, now you go do it. Or here's the checklist, now you go do it that I wrote. That's when we get a lot of breakage, and then a lot of times we don't even know why it happened. The better way to do it is I'm going to show you the process. Now you, this is the second person, you write down the SOP of what you saw. And you can do this with automated tools now like Guide and UseWell. There's a lot of tools that allow you to do that if it's a computer-based process. But you show me the process, or you write down the process that you saw. Then you take that checklist, that process, and you give it to a third person, ideally, and you have them run through it. 100% of the time, it's not going to work. And it's great because we get to fix things at an extremely granular level, and you get to find out, oh, this person didn't have the right access, that's why they didn't see that button, or they had to find this document, they didn't know where it was, so I need to put a link to it. And then once you do that, and sometimes it's very quick, sometimes it can take longer, you get to a process that you've now proven that a tertiary party, not a secondary, but a tertiary party can get through without error. And at that point, it's super easy to figure out where and how to automate things. But I've done this with almost 200-step process for one of the largest mortgage banks in the country, where we had 2 offshore VAs go through creating a loan, originating a loan, something that you need to do training for and get certified and get licensed for. And they were able to go through this process of 183 steps or something without any issues because we went through that process. That's an extreme example, but we need to do that to ultimately get processes that really work.